Good morning, Malta. Wow, should we try that again? Seems I've got more energy than all of you put together at the moment. Good morning, Malta. What a phenomenal vision from Silvio, right? I've never been to a conference that's been kicked off with a vision about shaping the future as bold and as ambitious and as cool and creative as that. So you're all super fortunate, and what I want to do is share some of the things that me and my team do all over the world with companies like yours around innovation, around leadership, around trying to build organizations that can genuinely contribute to a better future. So I'm going to start with this. Who's heard of that phrase before from Peter Drucker? Culture eats strategy for breakfast. My challenge on that, and my challenge to you is, a decade ago, in a linear, fairly predictable, stable world, I think that statement was right. Culture genuinely ate strategy for breakfast. The challenge that we now face is we live in a non-linear world, a complex world, an ambiguous world, a VUCA world, if any of you have heard that phrase. So, my clicker isn't working. Technical assistance from a clicker expert, if there is one. Who's the Malta guru on clickers? Can anyone advance the slides for me? Hello at the back. Perfect. Right. Who here is a CEO, a HR director, head of strategy, head of change, etc.? Who's in one of those kind of roles? Hands up. Who's currently trying to build a culture of innovation, to embed innovation as a core capability in their organization? You? Yeah. Cool. Right, stand up. Stand up if you match any of those things that I've just said. Come on, you've got to work for a living, guys. Right, this is totally at random, right? You were the first guy to stand up, so I applaud you. So come over here. This is the best-selling book on how to build a culture of innovation at the moment. There you go, no worries. Who else? Who else stood up? Who else stood up? Does no one want to save 30 euros? This is amazing. The guy right at the back over there, come and get your book. And then this guy over here at the front, you come and get your book. Come on, guys, if you want to save 30 euros, you've got to run. You're killing me here. There you go. Right, no worries, talk to you all later. Right, the stuff in there is all about how to do this stuff. There's thousands of books on innovation that you can buy on Amazon that all reinforce the need for innovation, what you've got to do, but very few of them talk about how. What I want to share with you today are some of the things that I work with senior teams on around how we do these things. So I'm not going to give you any answers today. What I'm going to do is focus on this. Everything I'm going to share with you today is meant to make you think. It's meant to challenge what you're doing in your organizations now and what you really should think about and question and challenge in order to do something different tomorrow. Slide, please. Can anyone sort the slides out? Right, 2008. Anyone remember that date? September 15th, 2008. I was super fortunate in the early 2000s. I built a group of companies, and I exited at 35 years old. The deal took 9 months, and I signed the deal with the lawyers on September the 9th, 2008. 6 days later, Lehman Brothers crashed. So I'm not blind to the fact that I've been incredibly lucky over that time. Can we get another clicker? Because yeah, I'm pressing the green one. Thank you. I'm not blind to the fact that I'm a complete technophile, right? I was probably just pressing the wrong button. I'm not blind to the fact that I was really, really lucky, right? We now know that post-Lehman Brothers, 88% of the Fortune 500 are dead. Those organizations have gone. Is it the way that I'm pressing this button? Right. Yes, thank you. Billion-dollar startups, right? Anyone heard of any of these companies? Snapchat, you've heard of that, right? And Slack, probably less obvious. The Honest Company, anyone heard of that? You know Jessica Alba, the actress, that's her company. Yeah. Look at the valuations and the age of these organizations. We've never, ever, ever lived in a time before where billion-dollar valuations and billion-dollar companies can be grown in such a short amount of time. And it's companies like this that are the real challenge to big, complex corporates. It's not other complex corporates that are challenging us. It's companies like these. Just a little bit of help. If you are frantically going to try and write down some of the things on these slides or take photos, we'll make sure that you can get a PDF of all the slides. So if I'm flicking forward, if this works, and you're halfway through writing something, don't worry about it. We'll make sure you get a PDF. I might need a clicker assistant. I think that would work. By 2027, the prediction is that 75% of that S&P 500 will be companies that we haven't even heard of, companies that haven't even started. Wouldn't it be amazing if a good proportion of those organizations were founded and started in Malta? How cool would that be to put Malta on a global stage? So that VUCA world, right? Volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. That's the world that we operate in. We can either choose to let that world consume us and let that world dominate what we do in our organizations, or we can choose to shape the future and do something different. We can choose to be genuinely innovative, not self-profess that we're innovative. There's been too much and too many organizations self-professing that they're innovative over the last decade. Now is the time where we have to switch from theater to actual action, to doing something genuinely different in our organizations. Who here, don't worry, it's not another technical fault. Who here has seen, who here has an Apple Mac? Who likes Apple Macs? So you guys bought the right products, right? Because you've never seen this screen. Who has a Windows-based PC? Yeah. You've probably seen that, right? That is the worst screen in the world. It's only nearly as bad as the screen you get on an iPhone where it says, this is your final attempt at your passcode, right? There's nothing else that fills you with dread other than that blue screen. This is a great metaphor for our organizations. The metaphor is exactly the same. We do not know when we're going to get that blue screen on our computers. And the metaphor is the same for our organizations. We do not know when disruption peeps its head around the corner and faces our organization. It's difficult to tell who is going to disrupt and who's going to take market share from us. So if we're not driving innovation, the metaphor of that blue screen of death, I think, is something that many organizations face. What I want to challenge you on are the things that I'm now going to share with you. First, I want to challenge you on how genuinely passionate you are about shaping the future. How genuinely passionate you are, and I mean genuinely now. This is looking, look at yourself in the mirror as CEO, as leaders, as influencers in your organizations. Genuinely ask yourself, are you genuinely passionate about doing something different? Because if you are, then the action you take is directly linked to that passion. Enzo Ferrari said, what matters most in life is passion, and I genuinely believe that. I believe that if we put innovation at the heart of our organizations, properly put it there, our organizations can do absolutely phenomenal things. We can build exceptional organizations, but we have to really embrace innovation and how to do it and the components of it. And I think culture used to eat strategy for breakfast, but my challenge is, I think strategy, leadership, and culture should now eat breakfast together. And I'm going to share some thoughts on why. Right, I'm not going to go through all these because we're going to give you the PDFs and the slides. But here's the challenge. Most organizations, and I would imagine most of you, admit that innovation is now crucial, right? Most of you will know that the markets are changing so fast that your organizations are no longer able to compete or stay in their traditional markets, that you've now got to start moving in different directions and shaping and creating new markets. Yeah? The challenge is, who's happy with how much innovation they're currently doing at the moment? Yeah? Genuinely ask yourselves, are we really, really innovating in our organization? Or are we on the bandwagon of using the word and doing some stuff, some theater? Or are we genuinely doing really, really cool creative stuff? And it's a challenge you have to have at board level. 93% of CEOs say their success, their long-term viability is dependent on innovation. Yeah? And there's loads of more stats, and you can see the evidence from all the reports. You guys, CEOs and leaders around the world, when they're surveyed, they're confirming that innovation is key. But here's the challenge. 75% of leaders believe they've got a culture of innovation, but only 30% of employees agree. Your challenge as leaders is to stop that polarization. Everyone in your organization has to be aligned around innovation. And as leaders, as influencers, whether you're a HR director, the CEO, we all have to work together so that that disparity closes. Yeah? Here are some really inconvenient truths around innovation. So these are all from stats and reports by all the big consulting firms, some of them, sponsors here. And every year, all of those organizations, all of those consultancies produce reports on innovation. What my team do is we pull all those stats together and we produce a report that combines all the stats from all over the world from all those reports. And here are some of the numbers. 53% of leaders say that the board talks about innovation, but no one's really clear what it means. How can we drive innovation forward in our organizations if we haven't got clarity on exactly what it is and how to do it at senior level? How can we drive innovation forward if we still have organizational structures that make it difficult to share knowledge or collaborate? Strategy, leadership, and culture, all combined, are the three key components for building innovation capability. That's why I think strategy, leadership, and culture should eat breakfast together. So, let's start with strategy. Darwin said it's not the strongest of species that survives, but the ones that are most capable of change, the ones that are most adaptable. And I genuinely believe that. We've never lived in a time or operated in an economic environment in a world where that ability to adapt and to shift and capitalize on opportunity has been more so. But strategy is no longer something I think, and me and my team think, we can do and create and look at over the long term. If you want to drive innovation and you want to build that adaptability and that agility, what we think is we've got to start looking at strategy more as a continuous hypothesis. What do we know about the world today? What can we genuinely and actively predict in the short term is going to happen? And then how do we act on that? And every time a new bit of information or a new bit of insight or a new bit of tech comes along, how do we then reassess that hypothesis? How do we then change that short-term strategy so that we keep moving in the right direction? So my challenge to you is think about the strategies that you've got in play in your organizations and think about how rigid and long-term they are and whether or not that's stopping you from adapting and shifting and changing direction on a continuous basis. What we've also got to do is really understand why we want to innovate. and how innovation happens. Innovation isn't about purely crowdsourcing ideas or asking our people for ideas. Innovation's about genuinely solving problems, solving big systemic problems for our customers. So the first thing we've got to do is really understand what's painful for those customers. And then when we understand what's painful for them, then we can think about how are we going to solve those problems, how are we going to take that pain away, and then how are we going to differentiate by then adding more value and giving them extra. So when you look at things like customer value proposition, for example, the language is all around pain and pain relief and unexpected gains. And if we use that kind of language in our organizations, it changes the conversation we have about what we do and how we do it. The other thing I want you to think about, and I want you to really challenge, is how are you starting to define and how do you talk about innovation in your organizations? We all know incremental innovation, or continuous improvement as it's also known. And then the big end of the rainbow pot of gold stuff, radical or disruptive innovation. And we're all aiming for that, right? Everyone talks about wanting to be radical and wanting to be disruptive. The challenge is, that's needle in a haystack stuff. How many organizations do you know, and how many of your competitors have genuinely done something really radical and really disruptive? It's just not there, right? You cannot build a strategy for doing something that is disruptive. You can't build a strategy for radical innovation. Something that is disruptive and something that is radical is so because it has an effect. And what we can't predict is the effect that our ideas and our solutions have. What we think is more important, and especially if you want to build a culture of innovation, is not necessarily focusing on incremental, because you all should be doing that anyway, and you probably all are. But also, not necessarily focusing on trying to be too radical. Your organizations are already doing this, so it's not going to help you shift your culture. If you try and aim for radical and disruptive innovation, that's probably going to translate into M&A, some kind of acquisition, or some kind of really high-level strategy that only the CEO and the board and the senior directors are going to be involved in. So again, you can't shift your culture and build a culture of innovation if only 5 or 6 people are involved in this kind of innovation. What we have to do in our organizations is position something in the middle that every one of our people can contribute to. We call it differentiated innovation. And the language is important. How do we find problems that our customers have and genuinely do something different? Genuinely delight them. And genuinely differentiate our organization, our product, and our proposition. And when you look at the impact of these, it's clear. Yes, we're doing incremental innovation, hundreds or thousands of really small things every day. We might do 1, maybe 2 radical or disruptive things over a long, several-year period in our organizations. But what we want are frequent ideas that have significant impact. If we can build a machine and build an organization and a culture that frequently comes up with really cool stuff, that frequently solves systemic, high-value problems, that have high enough impact, that's where competitive advantage is driven from. Because that means your organization is constantly pushing significantly forward on a daily basis. So my challenge to you guys is to think about what your innovation strategy looks like. To think about the frequency of high-value ideas and solutions and propositions that your organization's creating on a daily basis. And if you're not doing that, think about how you can start to implement that kind of approach to innovation. I'd also challenge how we define innovation. We heard earlier from Johan that if he asked you what your definition of innovation was, there would probably be 150 different answers. So what I want you to do is think about how you define innovation in your organizations, and then go back in and have a conversation about what you can do to genuinely define innovation in your organization so that everyone understands what it means. If we want to build innovation as a core organization-wide capability, then everyone in the organization needs to be on common ground about just what innovation is. So my quick tip is this. It's got to solve a problem, it's got to add value, and it's got to drive some kind of return for you. So if the stuff that you're doing isn't really interesting and really cool, if it doesn't relieve some kind of pain, if it doesn't create some kind of gain, and if it doesn't generate some kind of return for you, the likelihood is you've probably just invented stuff, you've not done something innovative. I'm not going to go through this, but this is something really interesting. We worked with and I won't mention the organization, but a huge global organization. If we want design thinking, jobs to be done, innovation or outcome-driven innovation, lean, all of those mechanisms and frameworks and tools that we apply in our organizations and teach our people to do, if we want that happening at the in the middle of our organizations on a daily basis, we've got to start to think about how we redesign our organizations so that that can happen. My challenge to you is, as a leader, how are you making your organizations way, way more intelligent than your competitors? Not just more intelligent about your market and your sector, but more intelligent about the world. How are you unearthing insight and intelligence around trends, around technology, around shifts in society, around the next generation and different demographics? All of those different things you pull together and you start to build a picture of the world that's different to your competitors. And the challenge is, because we don't live in that linear world anymore, we have to look way, way outside our organizations. Let me give you an example. If we all know that automated cars or self-driving cars are on the horizon, right? So traditionally, if something like that came into a market, it would disrupt the car market. The world we live in today means when automated cars come into play and they start to become commonplace, 20, 30, 40, 50 other industries are going to be disrupted. That's the effect that technology has. If you're in the breakdown and recovery business, you're dead. If you're in the car repair business, you're dead. If you spray cars for a living, you're dead. If you manufacture engine oil, for example, your business is dead. If you're in the car insurance business, that business model is dead. Because when automation comes in, the accident rate will drop, meaning insurance will shift. We won't need to repair cars. There'll be no need for things like engine oil because we'll all be battery powered and electric motors. So the repairs and how often vehicles break down will plummet. So whole industries are going to be disrupted when technology like that comes into force. So I want you to think about what effects other industries could have on your organizations and start to build hypotheses and strategies around what you could do. The next thing is you've got to become way, way more collaborative, both internal and external, if you're going to solve the kinds of problems that you're going to unearth. And the third thing is you've got to become really, really adaptable. You've got to use everything at your disposal to be able to act and shift very, very quickly, to change direction, to test and validate the assumptions that you have, the ideas that you come up with. How fast can you test them? How fast can you validate them? And how fast can you either cut them or get them to market? And look at the stats. 60% of major business leaders admit their senior teams don't understand their customers well enough. 66% of major business leaders claim their current organizational structure makes it difficult to share knowledge and drive creativity. And look at the last one. 68% of big complex corporates take just as long to get innovation and new stuff to market as they did 5 years ago. These are the things that we've got to change. So I challenge every one of you to go back into your organizations, show these slides to everyone that needs to see them in your organization, and think about how you can start to solve some of these challenges. So the second thing I want to talk to you about is leadership and how we as leaders and influencers can start to do some of these things. The first challenge I have for you is be really honest about the things as leaders that you really should let go of. Shaping the future and leading in the world that we're now in many cases is more about unlearning bad habits and ways of working than it is about learning new habits and new ways of working. So challenge yourself on some of the things that might have worked 10 years ago in terms of management and leadership, and some of the things that you might actually start to need to do differently as leaders. Think about your language and about that purpose that we talked about earlier, and think about that vision that was shared with you this morning, a real purpose-driven vision. And think as leaders how genuinely purpose-driven you are and how that can influence how you lead your organizations. I want you to think about language that you use and how inspiring even just words can be if delivered right. Sam Walton said, "We don't just want to be the best, we want to be legendary." Think about how powerful that language is if you use it in the right way as leaders in your organizations. Think about how inspiring just that shift in words can be to all the people that work for you. And we know curiosity and creativity are important. We all know that. That's part of the reason why you're at an innovation summit. IBM did a study a while ago and showed that CEOs around the world are now rapidly understanding how important creativity is as a leadership skill. This is Mark Parker, an absolutely amazing guy. If you don't know, he's the CEO of Nike, and he's regularly and widely considered the most creative CEO in the world. So go back to your organizations and think about this challenge. How can you as leaders be much more purpose-driven and add into that creativity? How can you blend those two things together to become much more curious as a leader, to start asking bigger and deeper and wider questions? Because when we're curious as people, and especially as leaders, it means we explore more and we experiment more. And when we explore and we experiment, that's when we push our organizations into uncharted territory. That's when we start to unearth new things. And when we unearth new things and we do something about it, that's when we start to differentiate as organizations, and that's where innovation comes from. So, think about this as a leader. Rather than that VUCA world being volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, my challenge to you as a leader is this. How can you be visionary? We've heard a brilliant visionary statement and outlook this morning. So how can you all be much more visionary as leaders? How can you be unbounded about what you think you can achieve? How can you be much more creative and much more ambitious? How can you blend all of those together to drive your organizations forward differently? And the final thing I want to talk to you about is culture. Culture did eat strategy for breakfast, but I think we've got to blend strategy, leadership, and culture together. And culture is really important. This is a brilliant book by a guy called Martin Butler. He's a brilliant friend of mine. I think I'm actually in the book, so it's a blatant plug. But the book's called It's Not All About Us, It's All About Them. And it's a brilliant overview and a set of interviews of phenomenal customer service and experience from global brands. And it's a real insight into how to really delight customers and how to genuinely drive innovation for them. Steve Jobs originally said this phrase, and he said, "Leaders start with the customer and work back towards technology." And I know many of you are in tech businesses, and we all want Malta to be that tech hub on the face of the earth, but it's not all about tech. Innovation isn't all about tech. We are living in a tech-driven world, but fundamentally it's about people. Jeff Bezos reframed Steve Jobs' saying, leaders start with the customer and work backwards, and that's all you've got to do. Don't focus on the tech, just work backwards to the solution. And if it's tech, great, but if it's not tech, great. Because the solution, the right answer is the right answer. And I think sometimes we get a bit too caught up in, it's got to be a tech solution. What's the tech solution? Let's just buy some tech. That's not innovation. So give your people real purpose. Give them the tools they need, build the right ecosystem, inspire them, and then just get the hell out of their way and let them do what you employ them to do. Most people in organizations want to do creative stuff. They want to do different stuff, and they're capable of doing it. But organizations tend to get in their way. So think as leaders how you can remove all of those structures that hinder that creative capability of your people. Build an environment where there's no risk and there's no fear of challenging the status quo, of challenging questions, of challenging leaders, of challenging what you do and how you do it. If you remove that one behavior or that one part of your culture as leaders, I guarantee your organization will shift massively. Because when people don't feel as though they're going to be condemned or anything else for challenging what the organization's doing, it frees them up to do really, really cool stuff. And my big warning sign, my big challenge to you is, if you think you understood millennials, wait for Generation Z. They are hitting the workforce now. They're just coming in. You're just starting to employ them. They are so different than the last generation. It's going to completely rock your world in terms of how you're going to have to lead this next generation of people. But these are the super creative ones. These are the entrepreneurs and the intrapreneurs that you want in your organizations. If you think back to that slide I showed you earlier, where we had all those new startups, if we don't employ the next generation of talent, they will build the billion-dollar startups that disrupt your organizations. So culturally, build a strategy where you employ those people and give them the freedom to be internal entrepreneurs, or intrapreneurs as the phrase goes. So strategy, leadership, and culture, for me, absolutely need to dine together. They should eat breakfast together. Think about how you'll shape the future. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for Cris Beswick. Cris, well done. Before you go, I'd love to have a quick chat with you on stage just before we go. So, just a few of the things you mentioned there. So, you stand on stages, we stand on stages across Europe, across the world, different countries, talking about innovation. Tell us, Malta, what chances does Malta have?
Listen, that vision this morning, right, that is the basis. Look at all the stuff that I said around leadership, around purpose, around language, and kicking off an think of Malta as an organization in this context. That is a leader giving you and giving Malta a purpose. It's giving you something visionary, something that no one in this room is going to say, oh, well, I don't really want that for Malta, right? So that purpose, think about what I talked about language and the importance of using the right language to inspire people to do really cool stuff. So it's there.
I love what you said earlier on about letting go, about letting go about the things that maybe we've been doing for so many years.
Yeah.
We get into the habit of doing it, and we just don't change. What have you let go of in the last couple of years?
Well, my physical appearance, for one. Loads of stuff. I think if I look back at my career, right, here's the thing. How many of you guys have had probably huge amounts of money spent on your management and leadership development throughout your careers? Most of you, right? Probably huge amounts of money. Here's the thing. how much of all that executive education and that development that your organizations have paid for, how much of it has prepared you genuinely to lead for the world we find ourselves in today? And the answer is very little or none. Innovation and shaping the future and all the things we talk about has never really been on the leadership development curriculum. So in some ways, I feel sorry for a lot of you guys because you're being asked to push organizations forward and you haven't really been given the development and the skills and the training to do it. And I'm the same. I learn every day. All right? I probably learn more than I forget, but I definitely forget and change some of the old things that I used to do.
Right at the beginning, you stood on this stage and you shared out, you were giving away your book, free book.
Yeah.
How much does that cost anyway? How much does it cost?
£30.
Right, so the people that got that book, they get it for absolutely free. What I did, I'm sorry, I saw you didn't have any more, but I looked under your laptop and I took it out under your laptop.
Okay.
One more book, who gets it?
It's got to be that man right
that
there.
That man there, maybe the Prime Minister?
I think so. Look,
Okay.
if Malta's going to push forward, if there's one tiny little thing in here that helps in the trajectory and the pace of that, then I think that's worth giving away a free book.
I think you should go over there and give it to him.
Superb. Cheers, mate. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, hands together for Mr. Cris Beswick. Right, thank you so much. Oh, by the way, just before you go, if people want you're sticking around, you're not going to jet off, if people want to talk to you, have a chat with you, have a coffee, can they do that?
So I'm sticking around. The slide's gone now, but it's, when you get the PDF, all my details are on the back. I'm on, I don't know, Facegram, Twitter book, whatever all those crazy things are that we're all supposed to use every day. You can email me. And then check out, the one thing that I never mentioned was there's a logo on there called the Future Shapers. That's an innovation platform that I started about 18 months ago now. Some of the best thinkers on innovation all over the world write articles and post content around all the challenges we've spoke about. It's free, go on, read it. It's brilliant insight for all of you guys who are challenged with building innovation. So yeah, and I'll be around. So,
Ladies and gentlemen, once again, Cris Beswick.